your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for a look back at Alberta this week. The province unveiled its budget earlier in the week, the last one before the provincial election at the end of May. Finance Minister Travis Toews tabled the spending document as the legislature began its spring sitting. Toews said the province had a large budget surplus thanks in part to strong oil and gas revenues coupled with higher payouts for maturing oil sands operations. Toews says Albertans will receive $2.4 billion in inflation relief, including $238 million for post-secondary students. He says there will also be an increase in the healthcare budget of $24.5 billion.
It's a 4.1% increase to reduce wait times in hospital emergency rooms, provide more surgical capacity, and get more ambulances on the road to respond to emergencies. We're supporting the Alberta Surgical Initiative with $237 million over 3 years, including $120 million in new money to build and expand operating rooms in 14 communities to allow thousands more surgeries across the province. $158 million this year alone will support a plan to increase the number of healthcare professionals in Alberta, especially in rural areas. Another $150 million over 3 years for emergency medical services will hire more staff and improve ambulance response times. And $15 million will put more ambulances on the road.
Toews says the province is much stronger financially. Our net debt to GDP ratio is at 10%, or the lowest in all of Canada. He added that over the past year, the province was able to pay down more than $13 billion worth of debt. Alberta is the latest province to sign an agreement in principle with the federal government on health care funding. Ottawa says the more than $24 billion will be invested in Alberta's health care system over the next 10 years. That will include $2.9 billion for a new bilateral agreement focused on shared health priorities and an immediate top-up of $233 million to the Canada Health Transfer to address urgent needs. Alberta is the 7th province to sign on after the 4 Atlantic provinces, Ontario and Manitoba. The agreements in principle are a first step to completing the $196 billion 10-year healthcare funding proposal the Trudeau government made on February the 7th. Premier Danielle Smith says this agreement with Ottawa will help ensure that many issues in the healthcare industry will be addressed. Health Minister Jason Copping says a big focus for the government right now has been on surgical wait times, which he says are finally decreasing.
The number of patients waiting longer for surgery than clinically recommended has dropped by 9.4% since November. As of November of last year, over 39,200 people were waiting too long for the surgeries they needed. As of last Monday, that number has been reduced to about 35,500. This is a remarkable decrease.
The province is moving forward with tax breaks for oil and gas companies that meet their legal obligations to clean up old well sites. The Liability Management Incentive Program would issue around $100 million in credits that companies could use to apply against royalties earned from new production. Credits would be earned by cleaning up well sites that have been inactive for at least 20 years. But the opposition NDP says public money should not be given to oil companies to do work that they're already obligated to do.
Danielle Smith herself has estimated it could cost Alberta $20 billion in royalty credits. That is almost the entire annual health budget. This $20 billion handout has faced widespread criticism, and rightly so. The president of the Rural Municipalities Association of Alberta said this is how a fox would design a henhouse. Scotiabank released a scathing report saying the plan would create negative public sentiment towards our oil and gas industry, and that it, quote, goes against the core capitalist principle that private companies should accept full responsibility for the liabilities they willingly accept.
Cypress Medicine Hat Independent MLA Drew Barnes echoes the sentiments of the official opposition. He says it's a bigger issue than we realize.
First of all, these oil and gas producers knew 100% that before they started to drill for these wells, that cleaning up after themselves was their responsibility, as it should be. And, that's been our system for years. So the fact that the UCP government is stepping in with Alberta families' tax dollars to help reduce a cost that should be borne by these producers is absolutely wrong.
Just what are Albertans to do with those orphaned wells? Is it true that you get what you pay for? What are your thoughts? Have your say on our BCN Twitter page. We need to take a quick break. Up next, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and more about the people's money and the government's budget. Keep it right here. We have more details on the recently released Alberta budget. Who's happy with it and who isn't? It's a budget the province is predicting will have a $2.4 billion surplus this year, thanks in large part to oil and gas revenues. A balanced budget that includes $158 million to recruit and retain health workers and $243 million over 3 years to augment primary care to help reduce bottlenecks in emergency rooms. The budget also promised a cap on post-secondary tuition increases beginning next year. Finance Minister Travis Taves also says there will be a $1.8 billion over the next 3 years to help reduce class sizes and improve bus transportation for students. The province is also putting close to $2 billion into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. The Alberta director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation says the budget that was released Tuesday looks good from a taxpayer's perspective. Chris Sims says we are seeing a lot of guardrails and emergency brakes being put onto future budgets. Sims explains how this new budget will help in the long run.
By us paying down the debt, that means we're not spending billions of dollars every year on debt interest charges. So people will call it debt servicing costs. In normal people talk, it's an interest charge. The government has to pay interest too. And the government doesn't have money. We have money. It's the taxpayers who are spending that money. And so in the long term, that means that we're going to be on a much more stable financial footing. To give you an idea, just a couple of months ago, that is why Moody's, that international monetary organization, gave Alberta a credit rating upgrade, because we're paying down the debt and we've got low taxes.
The province was able to pay down $13 billion worth of debt. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin expressed his frustration regarding the Alberta budget. He says he doesn't understand why his city didn't get enough attention paid to it in terms of funding.
I thought that the advocacy work that we were doing was going to pay off. There was a lot of great conversations, and probably not on paper, but some promises kept, and maybe not promises, or promises made, but maybe not promises kept. When they actually specify Central, South, Lethbridge, Red Deer was $400 and something million, and I'm thinking we've seen us at about 11 or 12 million dollars. So I don't know the answer to that, and but I'll have to dig deeper into it and find out what why we're missing the boat here on some of this funding.
Higgins says a big disappointment from the budget was the lack of a cath lab in our city, which he says is sorely needed. It's special imaging equipment used to see the arteries and check how well the blood is flowing to and from the heart. Higgins says patients shouldn't have to go to Calgary to be tested. Alberta Deputy Premier and Infrastructure Minister Nathan Neudorf addressed Lethbridge Mayor Higgins' concerns. MLA Neudorf says he agrees that smaller cities like Lethbridge need a cath lab, but it's out of his hands.
Now, I'd love a cath lab as well, and I've advocated for it. But the regional authority, the Alberta Health Services, didn't have that as a capital priority, and I can't overrule their requests. What I can do is support all the initiatives that have been put forward, which are the surgical initiative, which we got $14 million of funding for, and the renal program over the next 3 years of $11 million as well. So those are two in healthcare. I've supported every request from the City of Lethbridge and continue to fight for that.
Alberta's opposition leader, Rachel Notley, was not impressed with the budget either. Notley says the province fell short when it comes to healthcare funding.
The new spend is less than half of what Alberta's NDP is proposing to help families find a doctor, which is one of the reasons why the UCP plan won't work. The Smith budget won't increase access to health care, and it won't help keep Albertans out of the hospital. And speaking of hospitals, I was deeply disappointed to see there won't be shovels in the ground for the South Edmonton Hospital or the Red Deer Regional Hospital next year. If this was an Alberta NDP budget, construction on those new hospitals would be well underway and we would be planning for their grand openings.
Alberta finance critic Shannon Phillips says the UCP has created the most bloated and expensive government in Alberta history. She says a new budget analysis shows how the Smith government costs more than the Kenney government did.
The ministers' and premiers' offices in the Smith government cost $5 million more a year than the Kenney government, and $7.5 million more a year than the political offices for the Rachel Notley government. So let's just review Danielle Smith's priorities in the budget. There's only money for one new school here in Calgary, just one. But there's money for 27 ministers' offices and an almost 30% increase in spending on political staff, on campaign staff.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll bring you more when we return. Welcome back. The Alberta government announced it's investing $2.3 billion over the next 3 years into modernizing classrooms. That includes 4,500 upgraded spaces in Calgary, 4,100 in Edmonton, and 16,300 for the rest of the province. Education Minister Adriana LaGrange says the investment includes $372 million towards 10 new schools and 16 replacement schools. LaGrange says that includes a new school in West Lethbridge.
Of the remaining 5 projects, 3 are new schools, including a new public K-9 school in the community of Edgemont in Edmonton, a new Catholic elementary school in West Lethbridge, and a new public high school in Raymond, Alberta. The remaining 2 fully funded construction projects are both replacement schools. The replacement of Penhold Elementary School in Penhold will be fully funded. And we will also fully fund the replacement of Holy Family Catholic School in Wassetna.
Meanwhile, Alberta's Teachers Association President Jason Schilling says the budget is a good start, but it might be a few years too late. He says in terms of funding across Canada, Alberta is dead last and would need a boost of $1.2 billion to meet the Canadian average.
I would like to have seen more towards making sure that we are funding growth accordingly. You need to fund kids the first day they walk into that building to the last day that they walk out, not over the course of 3 years, because what it does is it puts school boards behind. And we've seen a flat budget without accounting for growth within the system for the last several years. And to throw money at it this year and say, okay, now we're accounting for growth. Well, you didn't do it for the last 3 years. And so there's still a lot of catch up that needs to be done right now. And we're hearing from teachers about the pressures that they're having trying to meet their students' needs. And there's some money there, but we're still working at a deficit right now.
Inclusion Alberta says the 2023 budget failed to address the needs of thousands of children and adults with developmental disabilities. Staff explained why they were not impressed with Travis Tave's budget.
Budget 2023 announced $137 million in additional funding to disability services, which is a substantial amount of money. But the vast majority of that money is to sustain the existing increase in staff wages that was announced in December. So what's left after that increase really won't go anywhere near close to addressing the thousands of Albertans who are currently waiting for supports and services. Data released in March of 2022 showed upwards of 6,000 children and adults without any supports through the FSCD or PDD program.
The Alberta government recently unpaused the indexation of AISH. They also said in December of last year that there would be $24 million in wage increases for just over 19,000 disability support workers. That includes around 1,000 homeless shelter staff and family violence prevention workers. Well, the 2023 Ag Expo and North American Seed Fair kicked off on Tuesday at the Lethbridge and District Exhibition. Hundreds of ag industry experts made their way to the city to showcase the newest in farming technology. Video journalist Micah Quinn chatted with organizers and exhibitors about why this event is so important to farmers.
We have about 300 exhibitors representing all sorts of farm equipment related services.
Exhibitors from around the globe have come together for the annual Ag Expo Extravaganza, and of the 300 exhibitors, close to 50 are brand new. Organizers highlighted what you can look forward to during the event.
And we have a waiting list of about 50 exhibitors as well. We've got both indoor and outdoor exhibits. A lot of the larger equipment is outdoors, but the majority of it is indoors.
The farm tech company GEA is a supplier for Lethbridge dairy milk, and they showcased a new robotic tool to help assist farmers in the milking of cows.
Some other unique features is the cows come in, it attaches, it does all the cleaning and stuff right inside the cup. And does some stimulating and make sure the cow's ready to milk, and then it basically starts the milking process. And then once it's done, does all the disinfecting and the cow moves on.
This is the first year that precision planting has made their way to Ag Expo. Staff talked about the challenges that growers face and how the company can help improve the work farmers are doing.
And it goes right down to the simple thing of, planter maintenance. A day we can come to your farm and adjust nuts and bolts, and you don't necessarily have to buy anything is a great day for us.
Imagine if you could turn your trash and plastic waste into fuel for your car. Well, it turns out it is possible. We talk about that right after the break. Stay with us.
Garbage, for example, it doesn't go into a blender and out comes some magic fuel. It's a little bit more complicated than that for us. So right now we're sorting through the specific waste streams that we're able to process efficiently.
Imagine a solution to plastic waste being dumped into the landfill or even the ocean. And what if that solution meant turning that waste into fuel for airplanes or cars? It's a concept that's being developed currently right here in Alberta through a company called Cielo Waste Solutions. And their CEO, Ryan Jackson, joins me from Calgary to talk about these innovations. Take a look. So Ryan, tell us more about this. I went onto your website and I watched the video. It's very fascinating. And you're actually finding different ways to think about garbage, is what it sounds like. So maybe tell us about the company's mission.
Our purpose is essentially to solve or to be a waste solutions company to allow people to come to us with their waste problem. A la CP Rail is a good example with their railroad ties, which we've publicly announced, and say, help. How can you do something with this that doesn't have us take it to a landfill or burn them, whatever it is. And so we have a process called thermocatalytic depolymerization, and I have practiced that more than once, TCD, and our process and technology allows us to convert certain types of waste into a fuel.
Fascinating. Okay, so you're basically figuring out how to take waste, turn it into usable fuels.
Currently, we do have a way to, so what we do is our process has a stage where we put into the reactor, and along with the wood waste, for example, in the context of railroad ties, and we're going to be trialing other types of rubber and plastics as an example. But it goes in with a carrier fluid and a catalyst, and out the back of it comes a distillate, which then can be refined into diesel, jet fuel, and then a byproduct of it is naphtha, which is a diluent for pipelines and whatnot. So that, along with other compounds, we can also create with different types of feedstock as well, potentially as an additive in a chemical processing plant or anything of that nature.
Okay, so what kinds of wastes are we talking about that can be used? You mentioned the railroad ties. Can we use like any household trash, literally, that's going to the landfill?
We have the ability to process specific waste currently. And so the broader term of garbage, for example, it doesn't go into a blender and out comes some magic fuel. It's a little bit more complicated than that for us. So right now, we're sorting through the specific waste streams that we're able to process efficiently.
How is this for the environment? How clean is this process?
So all of the process that we have is a closed loop. So what we get in the way of I guess, an off waste stream, we reintroduce into our process. So we do utilize, I paraphrase always, a meat processing facility where there's very little waste once they're through with everything. And that's essentially what our approach is as well. So from an emissions perspective, we incinerate what little waste gas there is off of the process. And our waste stream is essentially reintroduced back into the process to try and maximize efficiency. So we're in the single digits as far as our waste stream that comes off of the process.
Okay, how did this technology come to be? What was the motivating factor to develop this? It's quite interesting.
It was acquired from Germany, actually, back close to 10 years ago, and brought over to this country. And of course, innovation in and of itself is created around people who take a good idea or a good initial process and create something good from it. And that's essentially what has happened here, is that the core technology or process that was brought over, along with the catalyst and things of that nature, that then evolved into what we have today.
Where do you see this in 5 years?
I think that the best option is to say we'll have grown to a point where we've solved certain sector problems. Because remember, we're not a fuels producer. That's our byproduct that we produce by taking care of a waste stream. So it's important for us. That's why we're called Cielo Waste Solutions and not Cielo Oil and Gas. The waste stream has to be consistent, and it has to be there. Otherwise, we can't produce. The plastics issue in Canada is starting to change. The landscape is changing. They're banning single-use plastics. It's not as easy to find a waste stream for plastics in Canada. But remember, we're a globally focused company. So we're not looking solely at solving a Canadian problem. We're looking at solving a global problem.
Coming up after the break, we tell you what made headlines in our southern Alberta region. Be right back.
Methodist church also did the first services from there. So yeah, it was like a Swiss knife for the various community events.
Welcome back. A 33-year-old woman was arrested and charged following a fire that took place a week ago Friday at the Holiday Inn Hotel in Lethbridge's south side. Police say they were called to the blaze around 1 a.m. and were able to contain the fire to the one room. The woman, who was the lone occupant, was taken to hospital. The smoke and subsequent water damage from the sprinklers going off caused around $1 million in damage to the hotel. An investigation revealed that the fire was caused by the improper disposal of a cigarette. The woman was treated for her injuries and released from hospital and has since been arrested. 33-year-old Carissa Ricky Tyrell Plum faces multiple charges, including arson and disregard for human life. And in a separate incident, the historic Lethbridge Hotel is in the process of being demolished. This follows a fire that burned most of the building a week ago Friday morning. Officials determined that due to the weak structural integrity of the building, it had to come down. They also say the property was vacant at the time and the cause of the fire remains under investigation. Belinda Croson, the president of the Lethbridge Historical Society, says this is a huge loss for our community.
Both as an incredible historic building that stood over 120 years, but then also to the community itself who had memories of it. The buildings are the most tangible part of our history. Right? When we see those buildings stand, we make the connections to it. So it's a loss to the heritage community, to a loss of a historic building, but it's also a loss to the owners and to everyone else. We're very happy to hear so far that no one was hurt in the incident, but we're devastated that we lost another historic building.
Staff from the Galt Museum and Archives shared a little more of the history behind the iconic Lethbridge Hotel.
Various times it was the city government and I think Methodist church also did the first services from there. So yeah, it was like a Swiss knife for the various community events.
Lethbridge police are asking anyone who may have been driving in the area between 1:45 a.m. and 2:15 a.m. on Friday morning to check their dash cameras for activity in the vicinity of the hotel. They're asking anyone who can help with their investigation to call them as soon as possible. Well, Streets Alive mission raised around $65,000 last weekend during the coldest night of the year event. Officials with the Christian organization said more funds are set to come in. Members of the community walked around the Lethbridge downtown core to raise funds and show support for our most vulnerable. Staff from Streets Alive talked about how many walkers braved the cold for the special event.
We had 162 walkers come out on the day of the event, 25 teams. We had everyone of all ages. There were people of all ages there out willing to take on the cold. We were a little concerned in the morning with the wind, but we got a little bit of a reprieve. It was still cold, but fortunately, we all had somewhere warm to go back to. So many people in our world don't have somewhere warm to go back to. All of these dollars go directly to people that are on the streets, to people that are hungry, to people that are hurting, and to people that are homeless. So each dollar has a life impact. It really does.
Woods Homes Lethbridge also took part in the coldest night of the year walk at Henderson Lake and raised just under $6,000 to put to board the emergency youth shelter here in the city. Community labs in Medicine Hat, Brooks, and Lethbridge have transitioned from Alberta Precision Labs to DynaLife Medical Labs. Officials with Alberta Health Services say around 50 million tests a year will be generated from the three cities. APL in hospital laboratories will still serve patients who have a requisition form from a hospital or urgent care site. That will occur either through inpatient, emergency, or ambulatory clinics. Hospital labs in rural areas of the AHS South Zone that do not have access to community labs will continue to serve rural clients. The Alberta government is splitting up the job of wildlife management in the province. Officials say there will be a new department of hunting and fishing in the Forestry, Parks and Tourism Ministry. Officials say there needed to be more of a focus supporting fishing and hunting. That would include sport fishing regulations, hunting tags, trapping licenses, and human-wildlife conflicts. It will leave population counts, habitat, land use, species at risk, and wildlife disease control within Alberta environment and protected areas. Many of us want to maintain a healthy lifestyle and mindset, but most of us don't know that there's a connection between our brains and our guts. Recently, I had a chance to talk with Dr. Chelsea Mattis from the University of Lethbridge about the unlikely pairing in our body. More about this interesting research coming up next. Keep it right here.
People that have good health in older age will have a more diverse microbiome than people that may be suffering from different kinds of diseases, whether it's Alzheimer's or ulcerative colitis or diabetes.